state. And again, it is the subtle intellect which then projects the dream body, and we have a dream locus of perception. I peep out from the senses in my dream body. I have a dream ego, it's me, the dreamer, and it also projects a dream world in which that dream body can revel, gathering impressions from the waking state. Now, many people would ask Swamiji if there's any value in dream analysis, whether or not you should keep a dream journal and examine that. And his usual response was, dreams are the vomit of the mind. Meaning, the vast majority of our dreams are the undigested impressions of the waking state, the unresolved issues, etc., which the mind then, in the guise of pictures, of imagination, creates a world to work out those vasanas, those undigested impressions. And he would say, analyzing your dreams is akin to getting down on your hands and knees and going through the vomit in the toilet after you've thrown up. Now, there are what I call big dreams, where one may get a visitation from the Guru, or you might get prophecy about the world and things like that. These are impressions that come into the dream state that are not just the undigested impressions of the waking state world. Most men do not dream in color. Women tend to. But if you are a man, one of the ways you know you're having a big dream is it will be in vibrant color. Now, some men dream in color all the time. I happen to. But it varies from person to person. Now, Shankara sums up this section with the most important statement. The subtle body is not the self. The subtle body, like the gross body, is essentially what we call jada, inert. It has no inherent awareness. You are the awareness that illumines the subtle body. I am the knower of my sense perceptions. I am the knower of my feelings and memories. I am the knower of my thoughts. I am the knower of even ideas of identification, jiva bhavana. And I, the knower, am never touched by that. So the subtle body, like the gross body, undergoes changes. But the self does not. One of the images I like to use, if you have a cup of tea with a tea bag in it. So the cup is like the gross body. The tea and the tea bag are like the subtle body. The tea bag is the vasanas. Now I can pour the tea from one cup into another. It's called reincarnation. But the self is like the space in the cup, untouched by any of the changes in the gross body or the subtle body. Any questions about this before we go on? All right, 199.
Yes, sorry, Jim, really
Yes.
quickly, how do you define subtle body? What is the difference between subtle and gross? I mean, is gross just physical, something empirical?
We
Is that what
talked
you're
about this last time. Gross
Sorry.
and subtle are technical terms, and they have to do with vibrational quality.
Okay.
So, for example, the low notes on a piano are grosser than the high notes by this definition. The high notes are a faster vibration than the low notes. Or if we want to use physics, we can say that ice is a grosser form of H2O than water.
Okay.
Water is a grosser form than steam.
Yeah.
So the physical body and the subtle body, one is a faster vibration, it's more subtle. The gross is grosser. Another common metaphor is an iceberg. They say that 9/10 of an iceberg is invisible. What you see above the surface of the ocean is only 1/10 of the iceberg. So also for a human being, only a small portion of who we are is visible. Greater part of us is invisible. The subtle and the causal dimension. Does that make it clear, Justin?
Yes, it does. I guess I just struggle with the distance between subtle and gross, like empirical self. But like, what about me is subtle and what about me is gross?
What part of you is gross is your physical body.
Okay, and the subtle is the consciousness?
The pranas, which motivate things, because you can run and shout and stuff like that in a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Your sense perceptions, organs of action, organs of knowledge, your mind, your intellect, chitta, the flashlight quality, memory, ego sense, and in this particular map, it even includes the vasanas. All of that is included in the Sukshma Sharira. The simplest way to look at it, the body you function in a dream is your subtle body.
Okay.
The body you function in the waking state is your gross body.
Okay.
Does that make it a little clearer?
Yes, it does. Sorry. Thank you.
No, it's quite all right. It's quite all right. All right, next shloka. Ganesh?
Oh, sorry. Sarvavyaprutikaranam lingam idam syachidatmanah pumsah vasyadikam iva takshnastaneva atma bhavatya sangoyam. As the tools of a carpenter are his instruments, so the subtle body is an instrument for all activities of the Atman, which is knowledge absolute. This Atman, therefore, is perfectly unattached.
So this is not one of my favorite metaphors of like a carpenter having tools, because the carpenter has agency. And in fact, the self does not have agency. Agency is actually part of the subtle body. The metaphor that Swamiji used to use, it's like electricity and appliances. Electricity is not light, motion, or sound. The light bulb, the fan, and the stereo cannot light, move, or sing on their own. But when you have electricity contact, then the light bulb can shine, the fan can move, the stereo can sing. So also, the senses, the mind, the intellect, the subtle, the gross body are essentially inert. They have no capacity to do their thing without the enlivening presence of you. Yet we have what Gita calls a sparsha yoga. Prichati means to touch. So asparsha means untouched. Yoga means joined or united. So Swamiji, as a poet that he was, called it the touch of the untouched. The inner equipment cannot function without the presence of awareness. Yet, awareness is never touched by it. So what? What's the point of talking about this? I am not angry. I know anger in the mind. I am not depressed. I am the knower of depression. I am not confused. I am the knower of confusion. I am not full of doubt. I am the knower of doubt. All those internal experiences in the subtle body never touch me. Don't believe me, and don't believe Shankara. Look. See whether or not that's true for you. That there is, in fact, always a subject-object relationship. That you are always the uninvolved, untouched, unattached witness of all of that. This is this subtle discrimination that we're invited to practice. Any thoughts about this? All right, next one.
Andhatvam, andhatva patutva dharmaha, saugunyaihi, vagunyavashadhi chakshushaha, badhihi, yamu, yamukatvam, yamukatva mukhastathaiva, shrotadi dharma, natu veturatmanaha. Blindness, weakness, or keenness of the eye are conditions merely due to its defect or fitness. So too deafness, dumbness, etc. belong to the ear, etc. These attributes can never belong to the Atman, the all-knowing principle, the consciousness.
So just like the consciousness is not modified or changed by the modifications of the inner equipment, so also I am not tall, I am not short, I am not blind, I am not deaf, I am not whatever condition of the body. They only occur to the stula sharira, and it never touches me. In fact, it never even touches your subtle body. So, for example, many of you know I have macular degeneration. That is a condition of my gross body. I see perfectly in the dream. It is not a condition of my subtle body. Very interesting. Many older people in their stula sharira, oh God, I shuffle along now. I can't really walk as well as I used to. I need support. I have to have a cane or something like that. But in the dream state, they can run and jump. And of course, none of that touches the self, which has no qualities, no characteristics. It's just the space of consciousness. Let me turn my phone off, I'm sorry. All right, next one.
Uchvasinah Shwasa Vijrambhanakshuhu. Uchvasinah Shwasa Vijrambhanakshut Praspandanadhyut Kramanadikaha Kriyaha Pranadikarmani Vadanti Tajñaha Pranasya Dharma Vashanapi Pase. Experts call inhalation, exhalation, yawning, sneezing, secretion, death, etc. as functions of the pranas, while hunger and thirst are the dharmas of the main prana.
Yes, so all our various bodily functions are manifestations of the prana, the energy working in the body. So, best way to think about that is in a lot of non-Western medicine, if you're dealing with something like acupuncture or reflexology, where you're dealing with various energy centers in the body, we see that by being able to balance out the chi or the ki, which is simply another way of saying prana, we're able to, in fact, improve the health of the physical body. I'm not familiar with the paradigm in Ayurveda medicine, but I suspect there's much of the same thing goes on. Much of the same thing. So the various pranas affect the functioning of parts of the physical body, but also our mind and our mood. For example, if you go out and eat a whole lot of white sugar And you have a sugar rush, and then you get a crash, and then you feel depressed. See, it messes with the prana, which then the body and the mind are just two parts. I think I used the image a couple weeks ago. They're like an Oreo cookie, and the prana is the cream filling. It's the way energy is communicated back and forth between the mind and the body. All right, next one.
Antakaranam eteshu chakshuradishu varshmani ahamitya bhimanena tishtathya bhasate jasa. The inner equipment has its seat of expression in the sense organs, such as the eye, etc. Identifying with them, it exists, clothed in just a reflection of the Atman.
Yes. So the inner equipment is still grounded in and rooted in the sense experiences. So even if I think of things like feelings and thoughts, the information that determines all that comes through sense perception. Someone comes to me and they say, "Oh, I'm so sad, Jim. What are you sad about?" "Oh, I got a bad review at work." Well, how do you know you got a bad review at work? Well, my manager told me I did, and he gave me the printout. So it was my ears and my eyes that gave me this information. Now I'm sad. "Oh, Jim, I'm so happy. I got a raise." How do you know you got a raise? Because I looked at my paycheck and there's an extra $400 in it. See, it is my senses that report to it. So the various reactions of the mind and the intellect all gain the data from the sense organs. There's a lot that's implied here because seeing is not believing. What's so marvelous is we exist in a world right now where there's a half the country gets its data around politics from one source, and the other half of the country gets its data around politics from other sources. So it seems like two realities. In many ways it is. Well, what's real, Jim? What's real? Well, what the yogi says is if you can see it, it's always a mystery. If you can know it, it's always a mystery. The only thing that's real is the knower. It's the only dimension, the only thing that's never subject to doubt. That's not colored by imagination. Everything else is subject to question. Now, the yogi doesn't get upset about that. All right, next one.
Ahankaraha savigneyaha karta bhokta bhimanyayam satvadi guna yogena chavasthatrayam ashnute. Know that it is the ego which, identifying with the body, becomes the doer or the experiencer. And in union with the gunas such as sattva, this ego assumes the three different states of walking, dreaming, and deep sleep.
So the ego is actually a function in the subtlest part of the intellect. And we call it ego. In Sanskrit, the word here that Shankara has used is ahankara. Aham is simply the first pronoun. It means I. Kara comes from the root kri, which means to make or to do. We get words like karma, work, karana, cause, kriya, like a work or a cleansing, karta, doer, all come from the same root. So ahankara is the kind of thoughts that give rise to the personal sense of I. I like to call them I maker thoughts. So I am, and then you fill in the blank with something. I am tall, I am short, I am male, I am female, I am Indian, I am a Westerner, I am smart, I am stupid, I am successful, I am failure, I am lovable, I am not lovable, I am mentally ill, I am PTSD, all sorts of I am, fill in the blank. And this function in the subtle intellect, it's a function, identifies the self with the physical body. That's where this root identification takes place. Because all those various I am, fill in the blank, have as their root, I am my body. So I am my body plus a whole lot of emotional and mental conditionings. But the root of it is I am my body. Now, ahankara in and of itself is not a bad thing. You really couldn't function in the world without it. It's what coordinates the activities of the body through the day. So, for example, it's the same me that got up this morning, had breakfast. It's the same me that watched the news this afternoon. It's the same me that's teaching Viveka Chudamani tonight. Some people have a broken ahankara. We have various names for these people. One of them is a schizophrenic. So most of us have some sort of inner dialogue going on, but you know that's really your own inner voice. For the schizophrenic, it seems like it's coming from the outside. God is telling me to do this. The devil is after me, I can hear him. Another form is multiple personality, where it actually splits and creates different apparent persons, personalities. So ahankara is not inherently evil or bad. Our job is not to kill the ego. Our job is to see that it's not me. It's just a function in the subtle intellect. That's all it is. That's all it is. There are times when ego thickens and thins. If we were having class in my living room here, what I would do at this point is I would say, okay, everybody look at Deepa. Let's see whether or not she has spilled soup on her blouse, or whether or not she has spinach in her teeth. And everybody would look at Deepa, and Deepa would start to turn bright red. So she would become self-conscious with a small s. Ego thickening. At other times when we're deeply engrossed in a project, reading a book, listening to music, dancing, making love, ego thins. We don't have this sense of self, small s. Ahankara's most painful position is, how am I doing? Am I okay? What do they think of me? That's when we suffer just terribly. And all it is a kind of thinking. It's all it is. Many of the scriptures talk about a jiva as if it's a specific separate entity. Jiva comes from the root jivati, which means to live. Usually means the individuality. And the jiva is going to merge with Brahman or become Brahman or become a Mahatma or something like that. I'm fond of the language that Shankara's grandfather, Guru Gaudapada, uses. He says Jiv Bhavana, which means the attitude of feeling like a person. Bhavana means feelings or attitudes. So this feeling that I'm a person is like deep hypnotism, or like a long, long dream. When I'm identified with ego, when I'm identified with the body. All it is a function in the intellect. So it's at this point that I like to give people the slogan that will help you. If I feel like a person, I'm deluded. Yoga is not about building self-esteem. It's not about improving a personal sense of self. Go to your psychotherapist for that. Yoga is about dismantling our identification with any personal sense of self. Now, one of the biggest traps is, oh, I want to be a realized person. I want everybody to see how holy I am. Ooh, I can do high beam eyeballs and put people in an altered state. I need to tell people about my spiritual experiences because I'm identified with just another personal sense of self, being spiritual. And what yoga says That's nonsense. Let go of any personal idea of self. Instead, notice who you are. Aham Brahmasmi. I am that vast, empty space of consciousness. There's no me there. If we go back to our qualifications of a fit student and we look at vairagya, detachment, that desire to give up all attachment to enjoyments gained through the senses, and that desire to give up all identifications with any form of self, from the body up to and including the form of Brahma, the creator. So if you think that this is about becoming a powerful person, it's not what it's about. Let that go. The need to feel important, or the need to feel the opposite of that. I'm the worst person in the world. The need to feel unique in any way. This is what the practice is. To renounce any personal sense of self. If I think I'm a person, I'm deluded. Oh, Jim, I'm getting so much better at my yoga. I am improving so much. I am getting so much more quiet in my meditation. I think I am advancing on my spiritual path. Drop it, drop it, drop it. Let go of all personal sense of self. Does Brahman get more spiritual? Is Brahman advancing? Is Brahman more holy today than he was yesterday? That vast empty space of consciousness is beginningless and changeless and endless. Kutusta, still, stable like a mountain. Let the weather of your stupid thoughts and feelings go around the mountain peak. You'll be the mountain peak that never moves. Any thoughts on this? Questions? Next one.
Vishayanam anukulye sukhi dukhi viparyaye sukham dukkham cha tad dharmah sadanandasya natmanah. When the sense objects are conducive, the situation is happy. When they are non-conducive, it is miserable. Happiness and misery are, therefore, the dharmas of the ego and do not belong to the Atman, which is ever blissful.
Yes. So again, right now, let's define bliss, ananda, as no sorrow reaches there. We're going to nuance this later. But what are happiness and suffering? Sukham, happiness, dukkam, suffering. They are simply modifications of the ego, of the mind and the intellect. And when the situation is conducive, based on the force of my past, meets my expectation, my mind's happy. When the situation is non-conducive, I'm unhappy. That's your mind. And it hasn't changed since you popped out of the womb. That's the mind. And what's so fascinating, if you look at what makes you unhappy, tell me this is the first time you felt this way and this situation. It's so repetitive. Tell me about when something makes you happy. First time this has happened. And then what happens? It changes. Mr. Wonderful turns out to be a human being. A fabulous job turns out to have people in it. The wonderful house leaks. It's all that ever happens. The environment is conducive. The mind is happy. The environment is non-conducive. The mind is unhappy. So we want to turn the volume level down. Don't get involved with those reactions. If you don't feed them, they lose their energy. What used to be huge reactions and compulsions are just little surface blips of the mind. No big deal. You hear me say so frequently, just don't do something, stand there. Just don't do something, sit there. We give up trying to play whack-a-mole with the world, trying to dominate it into always being situationally conducive. It's doomed to failure. Everything in life is like a sine wave. The ocean, the wave comes in, the wave goes out. The seasons, they rotate in their seasons. The situation is conducive, the situation is non-conducive. The situation is conducive, again, the situation is non-conducive. So I love the saying from Yoga Vasishta, why try to cover the world in leather when you can wear shoes? What are the spiritual shoes? Deep, mature detachment. Now, we call the self bliss absolute. First of all, because no sorrow reaches there. But when the mind is not reacting with its craving, raga, or its aversion, Dvesha. And it comes home, it settles down. For those of you with a Christian background, this is the mystical meaning of Sabbath, of Shabbat. A rest. When the mind can rest in the self, it becomes blissful. Brahmananda rasa. We get the juice or the taste of the bliss of Brahman. Swamiji used to talk about a mediated and a non-mediated experience of the self. A mediated experience is when I do it through an object. When desire and object of desire become one, for a moment, the craving is gone. It's a taste of my self-nature. I'm happy. But if that's the only way I can bring my mind into a state of peace, I have an addictive relationship with the world. But if I learn to have an immediate experience, a non-mediated experience, I don't need the medium. I can let go. Let go. Then I'm a free person. My peace, my happiness, my contentment is no longer dependent on the world. All right, next one.
Atmarthatvena hi.
Little louder, please, Ganesh.
Atmarthatvena hi. Preyan vishayo nasvatah priyah. Swata eva hi sarvesham. Atma priyatamo yatah. Tata atma sadanando nasya dukham kadachana. Sense objects are pleasure-giving only because of the self which manifests through them, and not independently, for the self is, by its very nature, the most beloved of all. The self, therefore, is ever blissful and can never suffer any grief or misery.
So here Shankara begins to move us into what I call the pleasure principle. Now, I have been told that philosophers define that differently, but this is what I call the pleasure principle. What does it feel like to want something you don't have? It hurts. It sucks. Yoga says there is no other suffering other than wanting something you don't have, or the flip side aversion, I want to get rid of something I don't like, or the neurotic form, I have what I want, but I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. Now, we have this word dharma in Sanskrit, the nature of something or the essence of a thing without which it would not be the thing that it is. It's the dharma of water to be wet. It's the dharma of fire to burn. It's the dharma of sugar to be sweet. All right. What sense object has bliss as its dharma? Chocolate comes loose. But the first piece of chocolate is very good. But after I've eaten a pound of chocolate, whoa. first sip of wine, the bottom of the bottle of wine, whoa. Some people like women, some people like men. So we cannot find any one particular object that universally delivers pleasure or happiness. But everybody experiences happiness when they get what they want. So what yoga says is actually, I use the object to induce a state of self-abidance. The mind momentarily comes home. It's all that happens. So the sense objects are not bad. They're not good either. They're shunyata. They're empty. They're void. But I have attributed to the sense object joy-giving or misery-producing qualities. So for me, if I've decided that this widget is where the juice is, when I get the widget, oh yeah, that's where bliss is for me. Someone else, tui, nothing. So yoga says the world, the names and forms of the world are inherently empty. So what happens to my mind when I satisfy a desire? The Vikshepa Shakti, the projecting of the mind stops and it comes home. That feels good. That's the state we all seek. Oh, Jim, I want happiness. I just want peace of mind. Simple. Stop the wanting and you'll have it. So that's what we endeavor to do as yogis, by seeing the world for what it is, its inherent emptiness. I give up all this compulsion of getting this, that, or the other thing. Now, that doesn't mean we cannot experience the little bit of bliss we get through a sense object. We don't want to be frightened of the world. Chocolate's nice. Music's nice. But attachment to that, how do we get out of it? So the fool desires, goes after the object. When desire and object of desire become one, oh, that's where all the happiness is, and that compels the person to want to repeat the action. The yogi is content. An object of desire comes along, oh, a widget. I think I'll dance with the widget. Oh, that stopped my mind. Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. So the assignment here is to watch our minds. Watch what it feels like when you're wanting. When I was doing my sadhana, my nickname for my mind was Mudha, which means fool, because I was a man with many desires. I was running around wanting a lot. It was so painful. I wanted to stop and I couldn't, but you do it through insight to see what it is. But the other piece is you want to own your bliss. When you dance with an object and it satisfies your desire, notice what happens to your mind. Pleasure always tastes the same. What it does to my mind is the same. It will vary in intensity and it will vary in duration. And we get confused by the variety of sensory stimulus. But watch your mind. Own your bliss. You begin to see it's myself. It's the mind free, at least for a moment, from its longing, from its craving, from its thirsting, from its compulsions. All right, what number are we on? We'll stop here tonight.
We are going to do 107 next week.
107. We have time for some questions. These are very, very subtle ideas that we're getting into tonight. Any thoughts about the discussion on egoism and the discussion on the fundamental emptiness of the phenomenal world? Or anything else you want to ask about?
This is David.
Hi, David.
Hey there. One question. I was just looking at the Sanskrit writing of the shlokas, and I was wondering, how is it read? Is it read from bottom to top,
No,
right to left, or is it okay?
it's read just like English, from left to right and from top to bottom.
Okay.
But in the script is called Nagari or Devanagari, and it's just different letters. But like ancient Latin, it doesn't have punctuation, and the words run together. That's why at times Ganesh or Deepa or Punit will sometimes be a little unsure how it actually is supposed to go. Because unlike Hindi, which has the same alphabet, it's not so discretely divided up into words.
Thank you. So I've got a question about the ego sense.
Please.
The thing that was ringing in my mind as you were talking about the ego sense is how do I here I go, right? How do I talk about anything without engaging that ego sense, or is it maybe just to acknowledge the fact that I really can't
Excellent question.
anything without engaging that ego sense and, I don't know, solidifying it more?
You don't have to talk funny. For example, have you ever seen a sunset?
Yes.
No, you've never seen a sunset. You've seen an earth spin. And you've known that since probably the 7th or 8th grade. Right?
Sure. Yep.
but we always call it a sunset. So Swamiji would say, pass me the chutney. And I would get all upset. Wait a minute, he's not supposed to have an ego, you know. Doesn't mean you have to talk funny. It's about your knowledge, your insight, your understanding. Don't have to worry about how you speak. You speak in a way so you can interact appropriately with the world. But inside, you know. Does that make it a little clearer?
It does. Yes, I tend to think about like words as being very powerful, and that they tend to kind of, what the way we use our words, they kind of create more kind of, I guess, weight and kind of reality toward them or something like that.
You're absolutely right. So there are schools of Buddhists who refer to the body as this one. They don't say, honey, I'm going to the store. They say, this one is going to the store, meaning they're referring to this one, this body is going to the store. Now, again, for me, it's having to deal with other people thinking you talk funny is far more problematic than just knowing what you're talking about. So you get to figure that one out. But language is dualistic by nature. Our language, you cannot function in the world without language of I-ness and minus. And there's no problem with it. Again, ego in and of itself is not evil. The problem is when I think I'm the ego. I would say it's far more useful to pay attention as to when your heart moves. So one of my slogans, which I've shamelessly stolen from AA, and then I modified it, it's a spiritual axiom that if I'm disturbed, no matter the cause, I'm the one with the attachment, or I'm the one with the identification. So rather being so concerned about your speech, David, I would pay close attention to whether or not you're reacting, whether you're triggered. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. And I think that's good. I can only really pay attention to one thing at a time if I'm lucky. So.
Yeah. I mean, you go outside and you say, oh, it's such a clear day. The sky is so blue. You know the sky isn't blue. That's merely light being refracted through water vapor in the atmosphere.
True, but my feelings about it, my the thoughts and everything, the way I'm reacting to it is that the sky is blue, right? And somewhere it exists in the land of intellect and knowing that what the reality is, but I'm not actually interacting with that reality.
But you know it. I mean, the point that I'm getting at is your senses will report certain things, your speech can be in a certain way, but your knowledge is something much, much different. But if it's important to you and you want to use words, you'll find a way. You'll find a way through it.
Okay, thank you.
Probably silence. That's the best way not to get caught up in words. Good question. Very good question. Any other ones? Going once. Going twice. All right, we'll sit. Om Namah Shivaya.